that lends a lot of credibility. If you come in and can be upfront and honest and say, actually in this application, I think this product over here that I don't represent would be better for you. That all of a sudden now you become a trusted advisor rather than a salesman.
And I often say that we have all the requirements of space, right? Because it has to go underground and send us data from miles and miles away, and it has to work. Like, failure is not an option.
We'll put on, a standard mule shoe. Ours is slightly different just for that, but it's, everybody's got one.
The top drive and the drawworks really don't care whether the electrons coming at it are from a joystick or a PLC.
The panel, what you see here on the left, which is now controlled by one of my students, is showing you actually the control of our brakes.
As of now, geothermal is a pretty small market.
If you have tortuosity, the casing will be up against the side on part of the well. There won't be any cement there. The cement will have crescent around it.
So managed pressure drilling, it's been defined as a process to precisely control the pressure profile in the wellbore.
The key is being transparent with our clients in this case. So tell them what happened. If we had a failure, tell them exactly what happened. Whether it's our fault, whether it's whatever the issue was, we need to be transparent.
I think it's very important for everyone in the industry to know what's out there and kind of what's happening downhole as well.
I've probably worked on over 40 different performance limiters in my career. If I miss any of those, and the computer is raising weight on bit, and I miss any of those, I have a train wreck. The computer's going in the ocean.
Here's your new colors, here's your new thing. We don't do that at all.
Here's the tattoo you need to get.
Yeah, here's the tattoo. Sorry about the last one. We used to fake that all the time.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Vidor Locksmith Show. I'm your host, David Gibson, and I can never get this thing right. Here on the Vidor Locksmith Show, we're unlocking the secrets to success in the oil and gas industry, one interview and one presentation at a time, doing everything we can to be able to help you and everybody else out there to be able to do better here in the industry. Just off the cuff, random stuff. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in this week. Really happy to be able to see lots of people already tuning in for this one. We've got an amazing guest on the show today. I am really looking forward to this one. Just the other day, myself and the guest that is here today, John Clegg, we were just getting everything set up and ready to go for the show, and we were just ended up BSing online in this, the StreamYard format for about an hour, and we were just talking about stuff. So it makes me feel real good that we're going to be able to have a really good show today. I'm not seeing any of the comments coming in on LinkedIn yet. I don't know if it's working or not, but as per normal, number one, let me know where you guys are watching from. That's the most important one. Let us know where you guys are watching from. It's your first episode. Let us know. Love to be able to give anybody a shout out there. If you guys want to spam the comments box, you know what? I'm not going to try to regulate that stuff anymore. You guys want to tell us what company you're working for, what nonsense you're selling, you want to do your most terrible sales job ever, throw it in the comment section. I don't give an F anymore. Go for it. We had a whole bunch of that last week, and so it was, whatever. Here, we got the first couple. Richie, thank you, sir, from watching South Austin area. We've got a LinkedIn user from Qatar. Man, I wish I knew who that was. That'd be a real. So, most important person right there, Mr. Daniel Gibson, my cousin and business partner. He, more so than anybody else, is the one that's making this possible. So huge thank you to you, sir, and a huge thank you to your wife and to your kids, who allow you and support you in being able to do all the things that you do for the company and Gibson Reports and the Vidor Locksmith Show. So thank you so much, sir. I really do appreciate it. All right. Former guest, Peter Aird here. Thank you, sir, for being here. Former colleague, Barry Lacoste. Thanks for joining us, man. We've got Rachel watching from Houston, Texas. A LinkedIn user from Houston. Man, I'm going to send LinkedIn a message this week and ask them why this is happening. Here, let me take a quick little screenshot of this. Boop, boop, boop. Pull up this. Insert, screenshot, screen clipping. Sorry, guys, but I want to see if we can get this fixed. There we go. All right, now I've got it captured. I got it all done. We can keep back with the show. Watundi from Katy, Texas. Sir, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Farouk from Saudi. Wow, everybody. A lot of Houston people today. All right. India. I wonder what time is it in India? Anybody let me know what time it is. First episode from Pakistan. Thank you, sir. I do appreciate it. Hey, guys, because John Clegg is on the show today, let us know. Have you ever been on a rig that's run rotary steerable? If so, what rotary steerable were you running? What version of it? What year was it the first time you ever ran a rotary steerable tool out on a job site? Because the person that's talking today has a little bit of background in RSS tools. A little bit, just a little bit. Trying to see if we got, man, totally missed some of those. Wow, there's a whole bunch of comments coming in now. All right, Hope from Calgary, Canada. Thank you, sir, for being here. Andrew Quinlan in Houston, Texas. Thank you, sir. Ricardo, who's, like clockwork. We've got some guys that are always tuning in to be able to watch those, guys and gals that are always tuning in to watch this. So, Ricardo, I appreciate you very much. Thank you, sir, for being here. Michael from H-Town representing Tomax. Nicholas Williams, thank you, sir. Freebie Friday was excellent today. Be present, guys. Thank you, sir. We've got Jim Blaylock. Thank you, sir. Sorry. Paul McClure, awesome guy, very smart engineer. Thank you. I'm glad he's watching. Felipe, another person that's always tuning into the show. We've even got Ukraine today. Can't say that's the first time, but hey, thanks for being here. Path Maker Push and Point the Bit 6 3/4, 4 3/4. Eugene. Pathmaker. I've never even heard of that tool. Felipe says the Geopilot iCruise at Halliburton from Kuwait. Tom Roberts saying good morning. All right, what did Andrew say here? Ran lots of Weatherford Revolution. Ooh. Alan Mann from Conroe, Texas. Striker Directional tuning in. I wonder if Chris Wilson and Donnie Davis and who else is over there? Jeff Lassiter. Yeah. I wonder how many other Striker guys are watching. They should be Gibson Reports clients. Just saying. They should be. All right. Jean Ray from Lafayette, Louisiana. Hello from NL. What is NL? New. I don't know. That one's escaping me. I had a former guest, Graham Menzel-Wilmot. If you guys haven't seen the episode with Graham and you want to see somebody who is passionate and intense about drilling and performance drilling and what it actually means, like, go watch that episode. Be sure that you've got pen and paper ready and hit the pause button so you can take a ton of notes. One of our other super fans here, Oscar, thanks for always tuning in. He's on the list every time I do one of these episodes. I've got a little list. I've got an actual little computer algorithm that I'll run it. Just hit a button. It invites like 20 or 30 people automatically because I know they're going to tune in. They're going to be here. They're going to support the show. Oscar, Felipe, a couple other people on that list. So thanks, guys, for being here. Oh, man, this thing's going so fast. NL, Netherlands, Holland. Oh, okay. We got somebody watching it from Denmark, Alberta, Canada. All right, Marwan, thanks for being here. Oh, from Trinidad. Oh, wait, NL's Newfoundland? Okay, now I'm getting mixed up. So, all right, somebody's going to have to clarify it. All right, whatever. We'll just see. Oh, Paul from ADNOC. Hey, cool. We got somebody from ADNOC watching. That's an operator in the Middle East, if you guys didn't know that. Abu Dhabi. All right, guys. We got a really big announcement here. Sorry if I'm missing anybody else that has commented here. I'm going to try to keep pulling some of these up as we go. Really big announcement. So for the last 5 months, we've had somebody working here at Gibson Reports. It's been absolutely phenomenal, and it's been a pleasure working with them. We've had him come on the show and do a segment called A Minute with Fahim. And I've been telling everybody, like, look, this guy is super talented. He's super motivated. He would be an excellent addition to anybody's company. And it has come true. He is now leaving Gibson Reports. And so the segment is no longer called A Minute with Fahim. This is your last minute with Fahim. His new company says he can't do anything else outside of the company he's working with, so we can't continue doing the segment. So If you want to be the Minute with Steve or Minute with Bob or Minute with Sarah, whatever, get in touch with me. I'm more than willing to be able to see if we can help somebody out, help them be able to land a job or be able to maybe promote their company if they want to sponsor the show. Anyways, all right, guys. So this is, got to say hello to Scott. Scott's tuned into the show. Really appreciate that. Oman. Wow, we got a lot of people watching. Wait, who said this? RSS with Eastman Christensen Vertitrack in the 1980s. Wow, that's awesome. A lot of experience in the audience today. All right, so here we go. This is it. This is your last minute with Fahim.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks, David, for the intro. And also, I just want to say, I hope you find someone to keep continuing this segment on your show. But anyways, I'll move forward with this last minute that I want to talk about. So I came across this really interesting tool online, which is called Link Detector, right? So you know how we have like phone scanners that you can use to read QR codes. So a bunch of people, they made this similar sort of technology, but for links, right? So if you have books or anything with printed links, you can use your phone camera to like scan the link and you can actually press on it. So when I saw this, I was like, this is pretty cool. It sounds like you might be able to do this with Python as well, right? Because that's what I'm about. And then when I looked into the actual tool, it turns out they actually did make it with Python. And then there's like this whole GitHub page where they walk you through how they actually built this link detector using like object detector APIs from TensorFlow. And actually one of the libraries I used for Gibson reports called PyTesseract. So they used a bunch of these, mix them together and build this link detector, which was a really neat tool. So if you want to build something similar, if you want to do some work with object detection APIs, definitely check out that GitHub. I'll put the link somewhere. And yeah, check out the tool too. Maybe you could click some links. That's all I have for this week. So, and I guess it's last week. So goodbye, everyone, and keep enjoying the show. Keep tuning in. Thanks.
And that was your last minute with Fahim. Fahim, congratulations on the new job. I appreciate all of the work that you've done here for Gibson Reports, and I really wish we could keep you on. I really wish your new company was a little bit more open to the fact of having a little side income, a little side hustle. I mean, we're not competing in any way, shape, or form. So if anybody from your company is watching today, come on, guys, just let me have them for just a couple hours a week. Just a couple hours a week so we can keep doing some cool stuff. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're just having fun, doing some cool stuff, making money. So, like I said, Fahim, I appreciate you very, very, very much. And it's been an absolutely amazing opportunity and honor for me to be able to work with you. And I've learned a lot from a lot of the stuff that you've done. So your legacy will definitely carry on in the stuff that we continue doing with Gibson Reports. So thank you very much, sir. All right, guys. Let's see here. Nobody's really telling us too much about different RSS tools that they've run. So guys, feel free to throw that in. No clue why I couldn't access today's session on LinkedIn, so I joined through YouTube. Well, I don't know either. News though. Now we can actually give out the URL for LinkedIn Live ahead of the LinkedIn Live event. So before, as soon as I went live, that's when the URL was created and everybody would ask, well, what's the link to the show? What's the link to the show? Well, I don't have it before the show. I have to wait till I go live. So I'd get a lot of DMs and comments as we're starting the show. And people are asking, I need the link. I need the link. So I'd be over here running the show and messaging people at the same time. Now that no longer happens. Now we actually have the link beforehand. So I'll be posting that on Mondays prior to the show every week so that you can hit the little reminder button. You can save the link, you can do whatever so that you'll be able to get it leading up. So it's also helpful for the guests anytime they want to be able to share it and do things going forward. So that is a new feature. So not only will we have the event page on LinkedIn, we'll also have the URL ahead of time, but you can always watch on LinkedIn and or YouTube, which because of the change, we're noticing a much lower count on YouTube this week, higher on LinkedIn, and much lower on YouTube because I guess the changing of that. So interesting enough. Just another little tidbit there for you guys. All right, final thing before we bring on the guest. As per normal, if you guys are interested, we have a show on YouTube. It's called How It's Done. It's the manufacturing process of how things work here in our industry. So be sure to go and check that out. If your company wants to be a part of it, reach out to me. We'll be launching season 2 next year. Here we got this, and then we'll be bringing on our guest of honor today. All right, guys, back with you. I have to address something really quick. Roman asked a question. Are these introductions always this long? When does the actual interview start? I'm sorry. Did I hurt your feelings with an intro there? Watch how much this face cares. It's my show. John, thanks for being here, sir. I really do appreciate it. And the interview starts.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, I know today we're going to be covering a lot of different things, but I want you to give a little bit of a background to the audience because I don't think many people out there really know how big of an impact you've had on our industry.
Well, that's quite an introduction. So maybe it's because I've been in the industry for longer than I care to remember. I joined in 1986, so that's 34 years. And I spent probably 2/3 of the time since then in engineering, some shape or form, and about 1/3 of the time in operations or sales or project management. And for most of those 34 years, I've actually had like one foot in each camp. So I've been trying to develop new technology, but at the same time as trying to understand what the needs and what the requirements of that technology were, which is what the talk's really all about how to innovate, how to develop new products and new solutions and so on. I started with a company called Hycolog. It was actually Hycolog Drilling and Service back in the 80s. And it went on, and it's now part of NOV, recently relaunched. I was glad to see us read Hycolog. And after about 6 years there, we had a project that started off as a steerable drill bit that turned into a steerable near bit stabilizer. And that became one of the first rotary steerable systems. So somebody who I don't know has just said, "Nice to see you again, John. Nice to see you too, whoever you are." Yeah, that became one of the first rotary steerable systems in the world, which was Camco's rotary steerable became Schlumberger's power drive system. So I was like largely to blame for power drive in the early days. So you look at that as, you know, whichever way you want to. But that was I guess that was the thing that kickstarted my career. I've been involved with a few rotary steerable systems since as well, most recently Weatherford's new Magnus system. So if you have run one of those rotary steerables, surprised not to see more Schlumberger stuff up there. Chances are that you bumped into some of my legacy in one way or another. I'm not going to talk very much about rotary steerable this afternoon, though.
But you have made a large impact in that part of the industry. So I think people should know that.
You know how humble and whatever us Brits are, we don't like to take credit.
Well, so today, like you said, we are talking about innovation. I'll go ahead and pull up your screen thing. Any quick introduction you would like to make about the presentation that we are talking about today?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk about innovation. The title is Prepare to Forget Everything You Know. And maybe not everything you know, but maybe one or two surprising things and one or two things that might make you think differently about what innovation is, what it means, and the reasons why we do it. And I think in some cases it maybe won't be exactly what you think it is. I kind of practiced it for the whole of my career, and I never really thought about what it meant until about 12 years ago. I was working with NOV with a great friend of mine, unfortunately now the late Andy Murdoch. And Andy and I were putting together a show for NOV about innovation, for NOV Downhole. And we both realized that innovation isn't actually inventing things. It's actually the process of making money out of the things that you invented. And that kicked me off on a whole new voyage of discovery. And I spent the last 12 years kind of studying that and learning about how people innovate, what it really means. And now that I'm kind of semi-retired, but by semi-retired, what I mean is I'm still working, but I'm not getting paid for it anymore. But
okay, I guess I'm semi-retired then.
Yeah, so throw my energy into teaching the world what I know about innovation by blogging and writing a book and doing stuff like this, and paying some of it back.
All right. Well, whenever the book drops, we got to come on here and do like a quick reading or something like that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that'll be next year sometime, I hope.
All right, done deal. You guys heard it here first. Vidor Locksmith gets the scoop. All right, John, I'll let you take it away, sir.
Okay, well, as I just gave you a quick preamble, yeah, forget everything you knew about innovation. And I am now, let me just get the slide control. Okay. Yeah, I am now sort of semi-retired. I'm blogging on my own website. Here's just a couple of screenshots from the website. About innovation, and some of the stuff that will be in the presentation is stuff which is based on blogs I've already published. Some of the stuff you'll see is based on blogs which will be published at some point in the future, and some of it is based on other work I've done recently. I've thrown in a couple of slides from an SP paper I did for ADIPEC last month on the innovation process for the upstream oil and gas industry. But I'm going to start the story 4 years ago, and 4 years ago I was interviewing for a role with a Houston-based oilfield service company. Everybody knows who it is. It's Weatherford. And I've been offered the job. And I got a phone call, and there was like one last meeting because Weatherford had a new CTO. And we just need you to meet the new CTO. And I was like, is this another interview? No, it's not another interview. Just meet him. And of course, I had an interview with him for about an hour. And we chatted about all sorts of things. We chatted about family and wine and where we were living and stuff like that. And then right at the end, he said, you've been hired to develop this new rotary steerable system, right? And I said, yeah, that's right. And he said, how long did they tell you have to do it? And I said, well, we didn't talk specifics, but 3, 4, 5 years. And I think it's quite feasible. Stop there. He said, I'm going to stop you right there. You need to tell me if you can't do it in a year, because you seem like a really nice guy. And if you haven't done it in a year, I'd hate to have to fire you. And I thought, what the hell can I say? And I thought the only thing I could possibly say is, you're not going to fire me. It'll be okay. And so we shook hands, and I left the building, and I wrote down in the elevator thinking, what on earth have I done? What have I just committed to? But as I drove back to the hotel, I was thinking, well, actually, if I put into practice all the stuff I've learned over the years, it's perfectly possible to do it in a year. And so that's where we did that, and that's where we got to. We managed to achieve developing a tool and having the first test in a year, and I didn't get fired, which was nice. So I'm going to talk about the innovation in general, but I'm also going to talk about it specifically with relation to our industry. And I stole a quote from our incoming SB president, a guy called Tom Blasingame. I'm sure many of you know him. And this is a quote from JPT on October 2020, just a couple of months ago. And he talked about the stubborn perception we have in our industry that the future is going to look similar to the past. And I've seen this a lot over especially over the last 6 years, since 2014 and the crash in the oil price. Everybody has this belief that things are going to get back to normal one day. And I'm going to argue that actually things change all the time, and things might never get back to what we considered to be normal. They'll just be different. And it's just as possible to be successful when things are different as it is when they're normal. And I think we have to change the way we're thinking. And I think we have to stop expecting things to go back, because maybe they won't. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world at the moment. COVID-19 obviously has sent shockwaves through the economies of the whole world, and has dealt particularly cruel blow to our industry in the last year. But a lot of other things are happening, and they're happening very quickly as well. There's geopolitical changes. Living in the UK, we're going to see the UK exit the European Union in real terms in just a few weeks' time, and that's going to send a shockwave through the economy. There are technological changes. There may be future crises like pandemics. People are starting to think differently about sustainability and so on. So things are changing more and more quickly. And if you're going to survive in a world where things are changing more quickly, then you've got to be able to react quickly. So rapid development and rapid innovation become much more important. They effectively become the rule, because the future is not going to echo the past, and we're going to have to learn quickly how to adapt and how to change. And if you're in the rapids, you need a guide, and hopefully through the next 40 minutes or so, and hopefully at some point in the future as well, I can help to be your rapids guide and help to take you through it. So I'm going to start with the concept of innovation. And a lot of people think that innovation is this aha moment, you know, when you have a great new idea. It might come to you in the bath, like with Archimedes, or it might come into your head while you're driving to work or whatever. And people will say, if somebody comes up with something which is inventive, people will say that's an innovative idea. And I'm going to say, actually, it's not. It's not an innovative idea. It's an inventive idea. Innovation is about doing things differently, and it's not necessarily about coming up with new things. And the image on the slide is supposed to represent Airbnb. Airbnb is a very innovative company. It's changed the way that we rent property on our vacations. And it's done so without having actually created anything at all. There's no new technology. There's no new devices. There's no significant software. There's no breakthrough that they did in terms of tech. They use other people's tech, like they use your smartphone. They use your ISP and your cell phone provider. They use somebody else's apartment, and they kind of link you together. So innovation there, it's not about inventing things. It's just about doing things slightly differently. I recently studied innovation under a professor at Oxford University Side Business School, and he used to use this quote a lot. He loved it, from William Gibson, that the future's already here. It's just very unevenly distributed. And what he meant by using that quote is that all the stuff we need to innovate is already around us. It's just a question of sometimes doing what Airbnb did, taking things that already exist and putting them together in a different way. And there's a guy called Matt Ridley who wrote a book, a great book, The Rational Optimist, and he talks about innovation as being when ideas have sex. And it's a great metaphor for how it actually works, because you get new stuff and you get valuable stuff just by taking existing things and recombining them. And a great example of that is Dyson, the vacuum cleaner company. So everybody thinks that James Dyson invented a new kind of vacuum cleaner. Just he had this idea one day, and yeah, he did create a new kind of vacuum cleaner. But the story of how it happened is a little bit different, and it's quite instructive. It's worth thinking about, because it gives you an insight into how the process happens. So Dyson before he developed his vacuum cleaners, he was one of the shareholders in this company that made this thing called the ball barrow. And some of you might have seen it. It was like a wheelbarrow, but instead of a wheel on the front, it had this big orange spherical ball. So it was easier to steer, and it was easier to use on inclines and stuff like that. And the product was moderately successful, but the steel parts, the handles that you'd have on a wheelbarrow, were made of steel and then powder coated. And he had a lot of problems with his powder coating facility, because the jets kept clogging up. You get powder in there, and the whole thing would get clogged up and have to be unclogged at great expense and take a great amount of time. And somebody pointed him to industrial cyclones that were used to clean air in factories. And he had this idea that if he used industrial cyclones and scaled them down for his powder coating facility, it would stop the thing from jamming up. And it did, it worked. And then, inspired by this, he's sitting at home trying to work out why his vacuum cleaner bag needed to be emptied on a regular basis, and why even after he'd emptied it, it still didn't work properly. And he realized that technology that he'd used for the ball barrow manufacturing could be applied to a vacuum cleaner. So it wasn't really a new idea. The invention was actually taking an existing idea and sticking it in a vacuum cleaner, rather than using it in a powder coating facility or an industrial plant. And oftentimes that's how innovation works. It's not necessarily something new. It's just repurposing existing stuff, which we can already find around us. And this brings me on to something I mentioned at the beginning, which is that innovation and invention, they're two different words, and they're two different words for a reason. And one of the things I did when I was working with Andy back 12 years ago is try and figure out what innovation actually meant. And it's not as easy as you might think. As I went to the Oxford English Dictionary, and the Oxford English Dictionary says it's to make changes in something established, especially by introducing new methods, ideas, or products, or it's just to introduce something. Well, it's helpful, but it's not that helpful. So I did a bit more research, and I came across a couple of guys. Peter Drucker was one, and Peter Drucker talks about innovation as being the means by which they exploit change as an opportunity, which is getting us closer. But Michael Porter nailed it, and he talks about innovation as being a new way of doing things, which is commercialized. And that's the whole point of innovation. It's not to have a great idea. It's actually to have a great idea and commercialize it and create some benefit for yourself, which is generally going to be making money out of it. And so what innovation actually is a value chain. And there are 3 steps in the value chain. The first step is having the idea. And that can either be an eureka, oh, I've just invented something new, or it can come from, more often it will come from analyzing a need, just like James Dyson did. You see a problem, and then you have an idea of how to solve that problem. So you start with the need, you have the idea, and then using that idea, you create value. And what creating value means is that you provide something of benefit to your customer. And normally that's making them more money or saving them money, but it can be other kinds of benefit. It could be improving their image, or it could be some kind of social, altruistic benefit, but something which makes your customer's life better. And then the third step, and actually this is the step that people quite often forget about or aren't very good at, is capturing value. And just as the image implies, capturing value is where you actually get the money. And if you are able to save your customer money by doing something which is innovative, you have the right to take a share of the money that you've saved them. Or if you make them more profit, you have a right to take some of that profit as your price. And companies are often spectacularly bad at figuring out how much value they can take and what they can charge, what their pricing can be when they come up with an innovative product or service. And I'll touch on that a little bit later on. But the key thing is that innovation always includes that creation of value. Like I said, it could be making more money, it could be saving time or cost, could be making things easier, could be appealing to these higher level values I talked about. It's not just the idea. It's much more than just the idea. So in talking about value, I'm going to tell you a story. And the story, we'll talk for a few minutes about the Ford Edsel, which was launched with a big fanfare, never before a car like it, by the Ford Motor Company in 1957. This was a remarkable project, and the thing that marks it out as one of the world's most remarkable ever projects is this is a project that managed to lose Ford $350 million in the 1950s. I don't know how much that money is in real terms today, but it's a lot more than 350 million. But by all accounts, it was on all measurements, it was a spectacular failure. They began development of this new model in 1954. They launched it with this huge fanfare, never before a car like it, in 1957. And they actually gave up and discontinued it back in 1960. 3 years later, having sold less than 110,000 cars, and like I said, having lost more than $350 million on the entire thing. They didn't just build the car, they launched 1,200 showrooms. They repurposed Ford and Lincoln dealerships. They enticed dealerships over from other companies. They had Edsel-only showrooms, so they didn't sell any other cars in the showroom. And over 3 years, despite 2.8 million people going into the showrooms on the first day, the dealers only sold 93 cars each. So it was a remarkable failure. So yeah, but in today's terms, David's just put it up, $3.2 billion loss on a single project. That's quite remarkable. It's almost hard to think how you could do that. But Ford showed the way. So the problem was that Ford had this idea that they knew what people wanted. They had this vision of what a new car would be. They were losing market in the kind of mid-sized sort of low-end luxury car range to their competitors, and they had to respond, and they wanted to use the Edsel to respond. They had some delays launching the project. It was initially planned to be launched earlier in the 50s, but the Korean War kind of got in the way and pushed things back a couple of years. And that's one of the factors that led to the failure, but it's not an excuse, because Ford got this idea back in the early 50s that what people wanted, and then they just went off and did it. They never thought to go back and ask people if that was what they still wanted. They never thought to go back and check the market. And according to an article that was written, a book that was written about it a short time later, there was little regard for what the customers wanted. It was just the hunches of various committees in the company, these closed-door, smoke-filled rooms that they had in their headquarters, and they decided what they were going to do. And then they were amazed when they released the product, and there was no sales. By the time they released it, people had become more conscious about the cost of running their cars. They were starting to buy smaller, more compact vehicles instead of the larger size that the Edsel was, and the market had kind of disappeared. Customer preferences had changed, and Ford lived in this kind of bubble, this vacuum chamber, echo chamber, for sort of 3 or 4 years until they launched the product on the market, and realized what they'd done. So the moral of that story is that no matter how good your idea is, and by all accounts, the Edsel was a great car and it was a very good idea, but it was completely useless because nobody wanted it. It didn't provide value for customers that would cause them to want to go out and spend money and buy the car. So the key message there is that you've always got to think in terms of customer value when you're trying to innovate, when you're trying to develop products, services, solutions, whatever, and not just have a good idea and then try and persuade people to take it. So you've got this dynamic in this equation between what customers need and what you can provide, and the most important part of that equation is always going to be what customers need. And note the point that I use the word need and not want, because if you go and ask customers what they want, they won't necessarily tell you the truth, and neither will they forgive you if after the event you come back and you give them something that they said they wanted, but actually they needed something different, and they'll yell at you and say, why did you develop that? That's not what I wanted. And that's happened to me as recently as about 18 months, 2 years ago. So it happens a lot. It's a very easy trap to fall into. You've got to try and get under their skin and inside their heads and figure out what it is they actually need. And quite often that means looking at what their customers want and what their customers are doing. So you have to look quite a long way up the value chain. But innovation isn't all about developing new products and developing new services. Picture here of the inside of a Starbucks shop. And Starbucks started very small in Seattle in 1971. And their mission was to bring Italian coffee, good tasting Italian coffee, into a country, the US, where by their measure, most coffee you could buy in coffee bars was pretty terrible by comparison. And so they tried to change the quality of the product, and at the same time tried to change the ambience and bring this kind of sort of continental feel to their coffee bars. And they've changed a bit over the years, but they've successfully transformed the coffee market, well, really all over the world, not just in the US. And they've done so purely by packaging something up, a cup of coffee, and offering it in a very different way, charging a lot more money for it than you'd have paid back in the 1950s, even in real terms, by providing a kind of experience along the way. And so it's just as possible to be successful by changing your business model and effectively selling the same thing as it is by changing your product and keeping the same business model. So business model innovation, it's often quite easy to do. It requires a lot less expenditure than spending millions of R&D dollars on developing new products, and it's maybe not as widely thought about as it should be. And one of the reasons it may not be is because of this kind of what I'm going to call a leadership gap. In fact, it wasn't me. There was I got this out of a book. Read a lot of books recently on innovation, and this was a guy talking about business model innovation and lamenting the fact that there's quite often no senior position in a company to look at business model innovation. You have a CTO, Chief Technology Officer, who looks at technology. Who's actually responsible for innovating the business model? Sometimes it's not very clear, and sometimes the people who might have that responsibility are too focused on executing the existing business model. So thinking about sort of tactics instead of thinking about strategy. You know, does your company have somebody that's responsible for thinking strategically about new business models and how they can help you to innovate and develop your business going forward? So COVID has hit us really badly in the last year, but it's not the only threat that we have on our horizon. I released a blog post yesterday. I talk in there about Extinction Rebellion in the UK, amongst other things, and the impact that they've had on public thinking. And whether you agree with them or not, and I'm not going to say whether I agree with them or not. I think that a lot of the stuff they do is misguided, but maybe well-meaning. They have had a big impact, and they will continue to have a big impact. And one of the issues is that they're beginning to have impacts on the way that investors think. And that's potentially a serious problem for the industry. I don't think there's a week has gone by over this year when I haven't picked up a newspaper or looked on the internet and read the news and seen some major investment company or some major bank or some influential figure. I think on New Year's Day, it was the governor of the Bank of England. And just a couple of weeks ago, it was the grandchildren of John D. Rockefeller saying that you need to get out of fossil fuels and you need to start to invest in clean technology. And the problem is that if everybody stops investing in our industry as it exists, it's going to cease to exist. It's very, very hard to develop new technology or even to operate on a day-to-day basis if nobody's going to invest in you. And so there are threats to companies which are basically emerging as a result of the rapid changes and the rapid attitude changes in society that we see. And many years ago, Michael Porter released, and some of you may have seen Porter's 5 forces model. So he talks about the forces that act on companies, which is their customers, their suppliers, their competitors, and so on. And these are all very clearly market forces that work within the market. I'm going to suggest that there are now non-market forces, an equal number, another 5. And this is really, it starts with NGOs, pressure groups, protest groups, and stuff like that. And they have a disruptive influence on society, and they start to change the way that customers behave. And customers start to ask for different things than they asked before. And they can also start to impact the way that employees feel. If we finish up having the reputation of being the next tobacco industry, then we're going to find that younger people don't want to work with the industry, and that's going to give us a massive demographic problem. They can have impact on regulators, but my personal view is that regulators tend to be late to the party, and generally the impact of government and regulation is a lot lower than people might think it is, because they're always behind the curve, and the market tends to react faster than governments do. But the key one is down in the bottom right, which is investors. And if investors choose to withhold their money, then we're going to have a problem. And so a little while ago, I said we need to think about the needs of our customers. And whether we like it or not, I think we also need to start to think about the needs of other people that we impact in society, the needs of our employees, the needs of investors, the needs of our customers as they change their business models and they become energy companies rather than oil and gas companies. And also the way that we look to society at large, which is going to be reflected in the pressure that they put back on that group of people. So that's just a hint that there might be more difficult times ahead for all companies, because every company is going to be affected by these forces. But I think they might apply disproportionately to our industry. And I think we need to think very carefully about how we develop non-market strategies as well as market strategies to help us respond. But a lot of us don't even have market strategies. I mean, this is one of the slides that I put up in ADIPEC, that presentation I told you about. And this is looking at how many oil and gas companies in the oil and gas business, so, operators, service companies, contractors, the whole 9 yards. How many of them have an innovation strategy? And back in 2013, PwC did a survey on it, and they found that less than half of oil and gas executives thought that they had a well-defined innovation strategy. And then IBM and Oxford Economics had another look this year, and the number they came up with was 40%. So it hasn't changed. Nothing's changed in the last 7 years. And in some ways, that's quite disappointing for our industry. But in other ways, if you think about yourself as an individual, then it's potentially going to provide opportunities, because if your competition is not innovating, if your competition doesn't have a strategy to innovate, then if you develop one, then you should be home and dry. So I've talked about the background to innovation. I talked about why it's important to think about customer needs, and also why it's important to think about the broader needs of people that we might touch on in the market. I'm going to talk a bit now about ways that we can innovate, and some strategies that you can use to get ahead, and strategies that could be particularly useful when there's not a lot of money around. And so this is this matrix was created by a guy called Pisano. And he basically said, well, you either leverage an existing business model or you don't, or you leverage an existing technology or you don't. And based on that, he's got these 4 different types of innovation. And I'm going to go to the top left corner and talk about disruptive innovation. And disruptive innovation basically takes your existing stuff and you just use a new business model to deliver it. So the great thing about that is you don't have to pay to develop any new technology. In fact, okay, yeah, I'm going to skip over this slide. Yeah, disruption. So you don't have to develop any new technology. I'm going to talk about another company that people believe to be disruptive, and that is Uber. And Uber came in to the market sort of in the last decade. They have made a lot of changes. They've been disruptive, but what they've done in many cases is they've replaced taxi and limousine services with a service which is maybe a bit cheaper, maybe a bit easier to get to, but not quite as good. And that's basically what disruption is about. And the theory of disruption, this was put together by a guy called Clayton Christensen in a book he wrote called The Inventor's Dilemma. And what he showed us is that companies are almost duty bound to improve their products every year through sustaining and engineering and through incremental innovation. And so every year you'll get a new model of car that comes out, and every year will slightly improve the some aspect of the specification of one of our rotary steerable tools, or we'll come up with new drill bit designs or whatever. And you just continue to get better and better and better at things, because that's what your processes force you to do. And over time, product performance improves, which is great. But also, it improves to the point where it becomes better than the market demands. And once it becomes better than the market demands, there's no point in improving it anymore, because nobody's going to pay for the extra benefits, but companies carry on improving things. Until the point where somebody comes along and decides to make things a lot simpler. And that generally means slightly less well-featured, but either a lot cheaper or a lot easier to access. And that's a disruptive step. And then you take performance down below the maximum limit that customers demand, but into something which is acceptable and which people are prepared to accept if they're going to pay a bit less money. And then over time, you can then improve that sort of disrupted product by sustaining to get it back to the level that the market demands, the maximum level the market demands. And a great example of what is disruptive innovation is low-cost airlines. In Europe, that's companies like Ryanair and EasyJet. In the US, companies like Southwest and JetBlue. And what these guys realized is that air travel, very much of air travel, is about getting you from point A to point B. And all the other stuff that you get, comfortable seats, free drinks on the airplane, airport lounges and stuff like that, It's all nice to have, but there are people who aren't prepared to pay for that. And so they created a disruptive model where they offered stuff which is a lot cheaper and therefore a lot more accessible to a larger number of people, but which effectively provides the same service, getting you from point A to point B. And that's a good example of disruptive innovation. They were able to build businesses on the fact that they could do stuff cheaper and provide an inferior service, and that people were prepared to pay for the inferior service because it was more convenient for them. British Airways tried to do it with an airline called Go, which was a spectacular failure. And the reason it failed is because British Airways was not disruptive. What British Airways wanted to do was to keep its, kind of have its cake and eat it. They wanted to keep their premium airline, but they thought they needed to compete with these upstarts. So they'd have this cheap airline on the side. And it just doesn't work that way, because they couldn't separate the costs between the expensive business and the cheap business, and they got confused about who their customers were. And so they didn't really get into being disruptive. They just tried to produce something cheap on the side. And so it's a great example of not being disruptive. But companies can self-disrupt. And a good example of self-disruption is Netflix, who have on regular occasions taken their existing business model and trashed it and replaced it. And the key is to replace your business model before somebody else does. Because if your business model is no longer fit for purpose, like Blockbuster's wasn't, then somebody is going to come along and basically take it from you. And in this particular case, it was Netflix that took it from Blockbuster. But since then, Netflix have taken it from themselves by continuing to challenge and disrupt and change their business model, and basically make their business model redundant before anybody else does. So the next thing I want to talk about is clusters. And what I mean by clusters is places where industries get together voluntarily. And basically you see all around the world, and Houston, Texas, where a lot of people are listening from today, is a great example of this. Many companies, different companies in the same industry, will voluntarily locate themselves pretty much next door to each other. So this is a picture of Lewis Hamilton in last year's Mercedes Formula One car. So Mercedes just won the Constructors' Championship again, I think for the 6th or 7th time in a row in Formula One. And a few weeks ago, Lewis Hamilton won the Drivers' Championship again. And this year he became the most successful driver of all time in Formula One. And he did it in this German car, the Mercedes. And the interesting thing about this German Mercedes is it's actually built in the east of England, a few miles from the Silverstone racetrack, as are the cars from 6 of the 10 Formula One teams that compete. So all of these competing teams in this global business have chosen to locate themselves within a few miles of each other. They're probably all within about 80 minutes drive of each other, along with their supply chain and along with their the industry, sorry, the universities and the technological stuff that backs them up. And the question is, why do companies do this? And companies seem to do it because it makes more sense to be co-located with other companies in your industry than it does to be sort of separate from them, and in different countries or different continents. And there are definitely risks that accrue from being next door to your competitor, because your employees could go and quit and go and work for them quite easily. You could potentially lose secrets. They move through the walls by osmosis into the competition. But there's more value, it appears, by being close to people to overcome those potential concerns. And the value you get is by learning from the mistakes of others and by having this kind of collective learning. And so you all compete with each other, but you compete from a much higher base. And you see industries all over the world forming these clusters. And like I said, Houston's a great example. And once they're formed, they're kind of sticky, and they generally don't tend to come apart once they've been formed. So you can have industry clusters like motor racing and like oil and gas in Houston. And there are other kinds of clusters as well. This is a quote from a paper that was in Harvard Business Review quite recently that talks about how toddlers learn. And the way that toddlers learn is they copy each other and mimic each other. They don't actually try and outdo each other. And they took that learning and they applied it to companies like Uber. And they looked at companies like Uber and Lyft and Sidecar, the ride-sharing companies. And they found that in their early days, they behaved in exactly the same way. They didn't compete, they tried to copy and mimic and learn from each other's mistakes. And eventually they started to compete. And just like Mercedes, Uber came out to be the winner, or at least in the short term, the winner. But this was an example of more of an innovation cluster. This is not a physical location yet because it's not a physical industry. And when they started to sort of copy and mimic each other, there was no ride-sharing industry. They were creating it. But they were still able to somehow learn from each other and develop this new industry as a result of copying and mimicking, and not by sort of competing too aggressively. So I'm going to tell you the story of Route 128, because this is a cluster that kind of came unstuck. And Route 128 is kind of the ring road around the outer suburbs of Boston, Massachusetts. And it goes around the sort of southwest to the northwest of Boston, and then up to, it finishes on the coast at a place called Gloucester, which is also about 6 miles away from where I'm sitting at the moment, a different Gloucester, but the same name. And Route 128 was immortalized in Jonathan Richman's song Roadrunner, which was, because of my age, was a big favorite of mine during my youth. And Roadrunner was a song about basically a car journey in a Roadrunner around Route 128. And Route 128 was also known as America's Technology Highway. It was where all the big tech companies in the US were situated around Boston, on the outskirts. And they dominated the tech business in the US for many years. But they were very insular. These companies, I'm pretty sure if you went into these companies, all the engineers would have been wearing ties. And they'd have had very, very rigorous IP and patenting policies. And they'd have been very careful about not speaking to anybody outside the company about what you were doing. Held their secrets very tightly. The employees from these various companies didn't mix together socially because they were somewhat distant on this highway, and there weren't that many places to meet on the way home from work. And the glue that kind of holds these clusters together wasn't present in Route 128. And over time, it kind of disappeared and it went somewhere else. And of course, where it went was Silicon Valley. And when Route 128 was in its heyday, Silicon Valley was still like apricot farms and a few tech companies, but not very much. But Silicon Valley did have some of the basic stuff that you need to build an industry cluster. It had universities. It had sources of finance, like people that would lend you money. There was a burgeoning tech industry there, very small but burgeoning. But the thing that Silicon Valley had that Route 128 didn't have was bars and coffee shops. And it had, I see Tim said that, yeah, suits and ties, Tim, in Route 128. Good comment. So, yeah, but Silicon Valley had these after-work clubs where people would go and meet in each other's garages and share ideas about stuff they'd done at work and problems they had. And we've all heard the stories about companies like HP and Apple and Microsoft being sort of formed in people's garages. And that was because of the kind of social environment that existed in Silicon Valley, where it was okay to go and talk to competitors, and it was okay to meet people from outside your company after work. And, you know, everybody was very gregarious, and, you know, maybe the weather helped, I don't know. But it was a great case study of how the glue that's needed to make things work in innovation is very social. And you can't just do it by having a company where everybody comes in the morning and goes home at night. And a lot of companies, and I'm glad to see this is happening in our industry as well, a lot of companies are getting more open about innovation. Samsung is a great example of open innovation, where Samsung is probably the world's most successful company at the moment in terms of patents. Whether you look at patent applications or grants, they tend to have the most. And they're really, really good hardware. They have excellent hardware. They're great at building cell phones, smart TVs, fridges, you name it. But one of the things that they recognized is that they were actually pretty rubbish at software and systems. And so they began to open their doors to external parties to come in and help them to develop their software and systems. And they have these accelerators where, you know, a very small startup company can go and shelter under Samsung's umbrella and develop their new idea. And if Samsung likes them, then they'll back the idea, and it could very well be an acquisition target at some point in the future. But they don't try and do it all themselves. They recognize their weaknesses, and they try and go out and look for help from outside. And it's good to see at least one of the major service companies in Houston is now doing the same thing, has started their own accelerator, because bringing ideas in from the outside, especially when we're short of money and short of resources to develop all of the technology we need for ourselves, is a great way of doing it. And there are pros and cons. I mean, collaboration. By collaborating, like Samsung did, you can increase the size of the pie. So you're not just selling fridges; you're selling smart fridges. You're not selling TVs; you're selling smart TVs. You're not selling a mobile phone anymore, but you're selling this kind of ecosystem that people can almost live on these days. And because it drags you across different industries and different sectors, it can help to calm turbulence in the market. So if one industry's up, you can be participating in another industry that's that may be down, and vice versa. So it helps to smooth the overall sort of market that you're in. Competition definitely increases the size of the slice that you get, but I think especially as we move forward, it seems that collaboration gives you more and more opportunity to, and increasing the size of the pie is probably going to be more beneficial in increasing the size of the slice that you get. I'm going to pivot now. I'm going to talk about just a couple of slides about product development and how to do that. And I've very deliberately put up the Agile Manifesto. Now, Agile is a software development tool, and you'll see that if you look at the words on the bullets. But I'm putting it up to look at the way that you think if you start to think about Agile, because you don't worry so much about processes and tools. You worry more about individual people and the way they interact with each other. And you don't worry so much about documentation. You worry more about whether something works or not. And you value collaboration with customers, which is really, really important over nickeling and diming and getting the I's dotted and the T's crossed on contracts. And perhaps the most important one is that you don't necessarily have a plan that you follow slavishly, but you're able to respond to change. And I think that's really important. If you go back to the beginning of the presentation, talking about living in rapid and turbulent times, things are changing rapidly. If Ford with their Edsel had prioritized responding to change over following a plan, they would probably have saved themselves $350 million. And they'd also have had a successful product, which would have brought in a whole load more cash. And I think that was important then in the 50s. It's even more important now in the 2020s. And I know McKinsey in particular has talked about the fact that they see that more and more agile type collaboration and more agile type development is going to become more and more prevalent across industry, not just in software development. I've used agile type techniques for developing hardware projects and some fairly big hardware projects. And the way you approach it is slightly different, but the principles are the same. And one of the key principles is that you keep your customer involved all the way through, and you keep your eye on what customers need. And if you find out 1 year into your 3-year project that your customers' needs might be changing, the worst thing you can possibly do is just to carry on regardless and hope that you can sell whatever comes out at the end, because I guarantee you won't be able to. You have to stop and you have to take stock and say, okay, things have changed. What can we do about it? What's the best way we can respond to it? And it helps if you break your project up, just like Agile does, into blocks. And for each one of these blocks, and maybe you spend a month on this. You figure out what you want to do in the next month, and you understand what the requirements of your overall project are. You execute for a month, and then you have a review. You figure out, what did I do? What worked? What didn't work? What's changed in the market? And then you go around and you repeat the process. And as you define your requirements each time, one of the things you have in mind with a process like this, and one of the things you have in mind with Agile, is that you're not actually building something to a fixed specification and just taking as long as it needs and spending as much money as it takes. You actually fix the amount of money you spend and fix the amount of time, and you tweak the specification to fit. And so when you put your specification together, you have to think hard about what's absolutely necessary, what's the minimum viable product, what am I not going to do, and what can I miss out from this, what can I omit and put in a future product, or what's not even needed. And then what are the nice to haves? And you can use those nice to haves to trade as you go through the project, and as you begin to see that it's a bit more difficult than you thought, and you come up against this problem and this has changed, you can begin to trade out those nice to haves in order to make sure you finish on time and on budget. I'm going to come to my conclusions in a minute, but before I do that, I'm just going to finish by going back to this this idea, and this comes from Silicon Valley, that it's essential that we have to congregate if we're going to innovate. There's a guy called Matthew Syed he has a newspaper column in the UK, and he wrote this great book called Rebel Ideas, which is just about challenging the way you think. So thoroughly recommend it if anybody wants to pick up a copy of it. He wrote this article a few weeks ago in the Sunday Times in the UK, and he entitled it "Shut Bars and You Kill Whole Ecosystems." And he revisited that Route 128 story and how the lack of social interaction caused Route 128 to fail. And he contrasted that with the very loud voices at the moment that you hear saying, oh, the office is dead, and people aren't going to go back to work in offices when this is all over, and people have got used to working from home. And yeah, don't get me wrong, working from home is great. I mean, I've got my little office set up here at home, and it's got everything I need. And it's very, very convenient to have like a 15-second commute from the bedroom. But it does mean you don't see very many people. And over the course of time, over a year or two, if everybody's stuck in their little bubbles and not congregating in bars or in coffee shops, like in the image on the screen here, you're going to find that we begin to run out of ideas. And you're going to find that that recombination of ideas and those ideas having sex that Matt Ridley talked about earlier, it won't happen anymore. And so we have to get it into our heads that, yeah, you do actually have to get back into the office. You do actually have to get back to congregating, meeting after work. This is a really, really important part of the innovation process. And so my plea to everybody to finish up with is, don't think you can work from home for the next 10 years, because if you want to succeed, you can't. So just to summarize, we're now in times of very rapid and very unpredictable change. I mean, you know, things are happening very, very quickly all around us, and we have to be able to respond. Innovation is not having that aha moment and that great idea. It's a value chain where creating value and then capturing value is everything. And like I showed when I showed the Extinction Rebellion picture, non-market value is becoming increasingly important, and we do have to understand the non-market needs of our customers. It's great to reuse existing ideas. It's a lot cheaper than coming up with new ones. And many of the innovations that you see around you, and when you, as you look at things, start to think, where did those ideas come from? You know, there is very little that's new under the sun. And a lot of innovation can come from just taking existing ideas, maybe stuff that you borrow from a different industry, or stuff that you copy from something that you saw at home, or maybe something you tried 10 years ago and it didn't work for some reason because the processing wasn't available, or the materials technology wasn't available. And just keep recycling those ideas and trying to fit them together in ways that are going to provide new benefit. Look very hard at new business models, because I think new business models provide a lot of value, and potentially more value than developing new technology. You know, in between working on various rotary steerable systems, I worked for Altera, the big company, and I was with them through much of the life of their time with Interval Capital, and through Interval's successful sale to ESCO. And Altera had great technology, but they had a brilliant business model. And I think a lot of the benefit that Altera brought, and a lot of the reason that propelled them to such success, was the fact they had a great business model and really understood how it worked. And that business model was completely woven into their strategy. So think very hard about business models and how they can help you. Think about being disruptive. There's not a lot of money to spend on developing technology. So think about what would happen if we made things simpler and cheaper and maybe easier to use. And maybe there's value in creating simpler and less complex offerings. When you execute, be very flexible. Don't be forward. Make sure you keep listening to the voice of your customer and understanding what they want. Collaborate, and don't try and be too protective. Don't be those guys in Boston and protect everything to the point where you disappear and go out of business. And remember that we do have to collaborate with each other to innovate. So that's the end of the show. Just before we move on, this is kind of a post introduction, but what I'm doing now is I'm trying to offer these capabilities to companies around the world. And so if anybody is interested in talking more about innovation after the show, then I'd love to do so. That's my shameless plug. I'll take that off the screen, go back to the last key learnings. And David, I guess
you can do all the shameless plugging you want, sir. Go for it.
Bring you back in, and I'll let you start to pick out interesting. I'll just pick if I pick the questions, I'll just pick the easy ones. So I'll let you pick the interesting questions for me.
All right, so I'll start out with a difficult one. So you referenced a couple of these companies in your thing, and I believe this question is from Scott McGill. Have any of the recent technology disruptors, in quotes, Tesla, Uber, Airbnb, actually made a profit yet?
I suspect not. In fact, I strongly expect not. I mean, Airbnb is a great example because they just had their IPO, and I think they lost a massive amount of money this year. Yeah. You could. What would be interesting is to turn the question around and ask the same question about the unconventional business in North America. And I had. This may have changed over the last couple of years. I suspect it might have changed for the worse. We had I put together a panel session for DSATs at I don't remember which SPE conference it was. It might have been a couple of years ago in Fort Worth at the Drilling Conference, talking about, or it might have been in San Antonio actually the year before that, talking about investment in oil and gas and how new up and coming automation companies could get investment. I think Tom put a slide up saying that much like the airline industry, the total profit made from unconventionals was approximately zero. Now, some people have made a lot of money out of it. An equivalent number of people have lost a lot of money in it.
I know that there's some service company individuals who've made a lot of money. But that's one of those things where you have to be very aware of your financial income. It's not always going to be a linear growth.
Correct. Yeah. And it's not necessary to make money, make profit necessarily in the early days, but I am surprised by how successful Uber and Airbnb and Tesla are in the stock markets based on their track record so far. But that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, that's definitely something way outside of my scope of even being able to ask questions about. As far as
all I'm going to say is I didn't buy any Airbnb stock.
Here's another one. Speaking of Airbnb, aren't the algorithms Airbnb use innovative?
Possibly, yeah, but they're a fairly small part of their business. I think the innovation for Airbnb was realizing that you can make money off somebody else's assets, very much like Uber did. It's like the sharing economy. So Airbnb realized that we can be a hotel company without having to build hotels. And I think one of the reasons why the stock prices are high actually is because there's so little capital intensiveness in those businesses. So they don't actually own very much. So they don't have a lot of liabilities. I think the innovative step was realizing, the innovative process was realizing you can make money out of other people's property and then putting the pieces in place to be able to actually sort of start to create a business and create value for people like you and me who want to go and rent accommodation. I've used them a lot because it's very convenient if you want to be somewhere for more than a couple of days. I think the algorithms, it's kind of getting into the detail, and I think the algorithms they're supportive of the business model, but I think they're maybe inventive rather than innovative.
So there's another one. Is there a difference between being able to recognize the original strategy no longer delivers and a pivot in that of innovation?
I'm going to have to figure out what that means. Is there a difference between being able to recognize the original strategy no longer delivers and pivot? Not necessarily, no, because I think I can see the point of this question, and I think innovation has to be tied into your strategy. So innovation is almost like part of your strategy itself. So if your strategy no longer delivers and you change your strategy, you're going to be changing something about the way you do business. And I think you can be innovative in the way that you change your original strategy. So I'm not sure there's necessarily a strong difference between those two.
We did have, okay, so here's another one. What is the major tipping point when trying to determine innovate or collaborate?
I think you can innovate when I think you can collaborate and innovate at the same time. I think innovating is about creating and capturing value. And if you bring other people along for the ride, as long as it's net benefit for you, then it's still part of your innovation process. if you're talking about trying to determine whether you do something in-house or collaborate, Samsung is a good example there. I mean, Samsung recognize that they have core capabilities, and they work very hard to maintain those capabilities, which is built in hardware, and they work very hard to protect their IP position in hardware, which is their capability. But they're quite happy to collaborate in other aspects of their business. So I think if you're trying to determine whether to do things inside or out of house, what are your real core capabilities? What are the things you're really good at? Focus on those. And if there's something you're not quite sure about, see if somebody else will help you to do it, because it may well be that they can help you to do it much more effectively and much more quickly than you could do it yourself.
So I just have to throw this one up. This was great. Not at all what I was expecting. Very thought-provoking. Thank you.
That's good. I'm glad on 2 counts, maybe even 3 counts, especially the middle one.
We got this one. It says, John, do you feel that innovation in oil and gas drilling is too focused on a single technology and not enough on the holistic delivery of the well if we really want to deliver change? Here I would contrast the SEDCO 445 development by SEDCO and the Shell to an RSS initially developed in the 1990s with little traction into the market. I'm going to take the question off because it's kind of big. It's up here.
That's okay. Yeah, I got it. I guess the way I'll answer that is I'll talk about that RSS development in the 1990s. There were 2 or 3 RSS developments in the 1990s, so I'm not sure which one was referenced, but I'm going to talk about the one I was involved in, which is the Camco tool that became PowerDrive. And yeah, that was a technology development, but it was originally driven by the need to avoid using mud motors in high temperature wells in the Gulf of Thailand by building a steerable bit instead of using a steerable motor. And in fact, it was a long time before I actually went to the Gulf of Thailand. But as we developed it, we began to realize that the potential of rotary steering, and we began to talk to companies like BP. And BP were in the process of planning their witch farm development in southern England, which was the 10-kilometer extended reach wells. And we kind of developed this symbiotic relationship because we needed a customer to help us to develop the technology and to give the technology exposure and sort of runtime and stuff like that. And BP realized that they couldn't drill those 10-kilometer wells using steerable motors, so they had to have rotary steerable technology. And there were a couple of horses to back at the time. There was Baker Hughes, who were, I think, a little bit ahead with what became Autotrac, and Camco, and BP backed both of those. So that was a kind of a symbiotic relationship. It wasn't just technology being developed in isolation, but it was technology being developed for a very specific purpose, and a customer actually designing their operations around the availability of technology, which was going to be coming along in the not too distant future. Much like, I mean, I used Netflix as an example earlier. Netflix designed a lot of their business model around streaming when we were already using dial-up modems, because they realized that high-speed internet would be available at some point in the future, and they needed to be ready for it. So in both cases, I think it was success was achieved by thinking about the broader aspects of the market. So you're much more likely to succeed with innovation if you're thinking about the purpose of what you're doing and the use of the technology than developing something in isolation. I think developing something in isolation, building a better mousetrap and hoping that people beat a path to your door, it's a very shotgun approach. I mean, sometimes you'll be successful and pat yourself on the back, but oftentimes you'll have some sort of spectacular failures that you need to bury.
So I have this one real quick. Adrian Lodros, who is the subcommittee chair or sub-program chair for the ISCWSA, says, great presentation. Great to see you again. So Adrian, thanks for watching. I appreciate that. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Ian Sylvester says, very insightful, John. Solid experience sharing and legacy of RSS development over the decades, highly applicable to many new value creating innovations. Thanks. So really like this. Here's a great comment from Peter Ayer. Need to get out to the rig site every once in a while to talk to troops. Otherwise, you forget what needs to be innovated. Ended it with a question mark, so feel free to answer.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, Peter. And you need to think very broadly about who your customers are. And your customers, they're obviously the usual people, which are the people that pay you money, you hope. I said you need to think about their customers as well, but also you need to think about maybe internal customers and people who are going to be using your stuff. And you need to understand what all of those needs are before you go develop the technology. And if you send your troops out on the rig site an email saying, what do you want from this next development of such and such, they'll probably send you some half-assed email back where they haven't really thought about it very much, and they'll give you some ideas. And then you take those as gospel and you develop the thing. If you actually go out to the rig site and spend a couple of days there and talk to them and watch what they do and see where the problems are and see where the difficulties are, and sometimes you'll see problems that they have that they don't recognize because they've got so used to fixing them. It just becomes second nature to work around things. If you actually go out there and spend time like in your customer's shoes, literally, you're going to be much more successful than if you try and do things remotely and expect somehow the questions and the answers to come to you.
This actually brings up a great point next. It says, so John DeWart, so it's like we just had Adrian's comment, who's part of, he's a program for ISCWSA, now John DeWart, who's part of the DSATS group. And then yesterday I did a presentation for DPUTS. So all of the drilling parts for SBE. We focus an awful lot on when the bit is on bubble, maybe 20% of the time, and not enough on other areas, pipe handling, where huge amounts of times are wasted or lost.
Yeah, so think about your customer's customer and try and think about things holistically.
Very true. Let's see. I just hit the wrong button. Now I just lost my place. All right, let's see. Graham says, great job, guys. As always, insightful, thought-provoking. Grant says, great, but need to log out. Okay, feel free. I'm trying to see here. Sorry, guys. I hit the wrong button and like it just automatically goes all the way to the bottom instead of just like letting me scroll through some of the questions. So I'm trying to go back and find my spot here. Oh, what's the correlation between innovation and diversity? Excellent question.
That's a really good question. And that's actually something that wasn't covered in the presentation, but it is something that I'm planning to write about. I've been doing some studying about, and there is a strong correlation. There's a lot of stuff been written about. You may have heard about things like groupthink, where you can get a group of people. I think Ford was a good example of this, where people are from similar backgrounds and have similar sets of values. They can think in very much the same way. And in fact, that book I mentioned, Rebel Ideas, I think Matthew Syed has a chapter on that. And he talks in that chapter about how the CIA missed 9/11 coming. And one of many reasons was because there was nobody in the group that thought like the terrorists might think. And if you'd have had somebody in the group that thought the way terrorists think instead of the way that people defending against terrorists think, you'd have been able to anticipate some of the actions, and you'd be able to pick up on some of the early warning signs that appeared. And that's an extreme example, but if you have a more diverse collection of people in your group as you're trying to figure out what you need to do, especially as you're developing strategy, you're more likely to hit on points that are going to resonate with customers that you might not have thought existed or that you might not have thought you could access. And you're more likely to find some of the potential problems and issues. So that's a great question, Rachel.
So here's another one. Do you think that oilfield service companies should divest some product lines to be smaller and more nimble companies like Schlumberger did with Liberty?
I think that's horses for courses, to be honest. I don't want to give the OFS companies any advice. I think it really depends. If the product lines fit with your strategy, and if you can develop a strategy and a business model to capitalize on them, then by all means keep them. If they're not a great fit with your strategy, then you could maybe see them be more successful somewhere else.
Peter, who's probably just down the road from me, asking questions. Why are many operating companies simply against the copy and paste, I guess it should say copy and paste approach of other operators who are clearly streets ahead in terms of strategic innovation?
Oh, Peter, I'm not quite sure what you're getting at there. I'm not quite sure what Peter's getting at there. So Peter, put up another comment if you want to clarify it. But I think there is a tendency in a lot of companies, in our industry in particular, to be quite insular and not to like stuff that wasn't invented here. And I think I see that as being, it's prevalent across the world, but I see it as being very prevalent in upstream oil and gas.
Trying to make sure I scroll through this slow enough so I don't.
I'll just see if Peter's come back with.
What was the name of the book you mentioned? You've actually mentioned several of them. I know one of them was The Innovator's Dilemma, which is a book I have read.
Clayton Christensen, Innovator's Dilemma, Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed. What else did I mention?
Fahim's still watching. Put those books, the Amazon link to them in the comment section, or somebody. I mean, just help us out here. All right. Could you also ask the correlation between adversity and innovation? Years 2000, 2015 were too sweet for oil and gas.
Yeah, we kind of got fat and happy in the years 2000 to 2015, and you began to believe we were invincible, and that the as late as the summer of 2014, I was hearing people talk about the oil price going to $200, and we all know what happened right after that. So I think definitely you're going to work a little bit harder in conditions of adversity, and we are in conditions of severe adversity now. And I think the key is to be smart and to not to be overwhelmed and not to kind of down tools and give up, but to actually recognize that adversity generally provides opportunity. When I showed the graph earlier of the number of companies that had a innovation strategy, most companies don't. So therefore, if you do, you're going to be able to get ahead. So recognize that as difficult as things might be, it provides opportunity to do things slightly better than other companies who might be equally badly impacted. And I guess there's also the opportunity for our industry to think about itself as being an energy industry and not an oil and gas industry. There's a guy I used to work for many years ago, one of my mentors, a guy called John Barr, who there might be one or two people on the call who remember John. And amongst many other things, John was director of a company that made those like pressed galvanized steel barriers that you see along the side of freeways and motorways, stop cars and trucks from going off the road and hitting each other. And this was at a time when concrete barriers and the tension stayed cables down the center of freeways were becoming more common. So he went to a board meeting and he said, shouldn't we be looking at these cables and concrete barriers? And they said, no, we're not in that business. And they thought they were in the business of building metal barriers. They were actually in the business of stopping cars from colliding with each other. And so they should have been thinking about that because that was the business they were in. We're not necessarily in the business of extracting oil and gas from the ground. We're in the business of making sure people have got heat and light and power and fuel for vehicles and airplanes and stuff like that. So if we open our perspectives a little bit, I think there's a lot of technology we've got that we can take and we can apply in adjacent industries. And drilling for gas to produce hydrogen and then injecting the CO2 is one great example of how the industry could pivot.
Very well. Well, the questions are drying up, but thank you so much, John, for being here. I do want to add this one thing. This has always been one of the things I've always kind of lived by. Engineer I used to work for. He's actually the CEO of Kinetic Upstream, an RSS company. Jeff Lassiter told me once upon a time, he's like, you know what a good idea at the wrong time is? A bad idea. And it's always one of those things. It's just like there's a right time for everything, and if that time escapes, kind of like the Edsel thing that you were talking about earlier, if that time escapes, well, then it went from a good idea, now it's a bad idea, or it could be a bad idea now, but could be a good idea later. So it's a lot of that timing has to do with that. Any last
absolutely
words?
Right. Yeah, absolutely right.
Any last words from you, John? Anything else that you'd like to plug or tell everybody out there that's still watching? Do we have anybody still watching?
What you just said kind of sums it up. I mean, the idea has to be right for the time. You have to you have to understand what the market's going to need when you deliver it. And if it was a good idea when you started and becomes a bad idea, then the best thing you can do is just to stop and put it on one side, and don't feel compelled to go through and finish it because we've already spent $10 million on this. Well, it doesn't matter if nobody wants it anymore. It doesn't matter because you're never going to get it back. But as you said, it might have been a bad idea a few years ago and suddenly become a good idea now. And then you can go back into your cupboard full of ideas that failed and pull it out and resurrect it and make a success from it. So hopefully that's something inspirational to finish with. I think we do have a very positive future ahead of us. We just need to be innovative in the way that we deliver it, and that's innovative in the sense of creating value and not forgetting to capture some of that value for ourselves.
Here's a great last question. What's the title of your book going to be when it comes out, John?
I haven't figured it out exactly yet, but it's probably going to have the words velocity and value and maybe sustainable in the title.
Works for me.
Working on it.
The book is a work in progress, so we will.
Yeah, the title will be the last thing probably, but I'm hoping it'll be out sometime next year.
All right. Well, hey, everybody out there, thank you guys so much for watching. We really do appreciate it. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like I said, I'm trying to do something innovative. There, but I need 1,000 subscribers before I can do it. It's just the rules of the game. So hopefully it'll still be a good idea by the time I'm trying to be able to execute on it. So guys, please subscribe on YouTube. Guys, please stay tuned. Next week, we've got Chad Hannick. He's going to come on, and I mean, he's used to work for doing some NASA stuff, and now he's doing survey accuracy stuff. So he's probably going to have some really cool stuff to be able to talk about. He's actually has a calculator inside of his brain that he uses every time he talks to me. Trying to think of any other news or anything that we'll be able to share with you guys. That's pretty much it. I've started to get the lineup set up for January. I'm not posting anything publicly about it just yet. The only other thing is that we are completely redoing the studio in here. So next week's episode will probably be the last one with this look and feel of it. When we come back in the new year, hopefully everything will be done. This will look completely different. We do have the green lights on the rig. This one might be going away. Not sure if this is still going to carry over, but we thank everybody out there for watching. We really do appreciate all of the support from everybody. It means an absolute ton to me to have all of this support going forward, you know, just to keep moving this show forward. It really does mean a lot, guys. This is what keeps me, you know, making sure that I'm bringing the best guests that we can. If you guys have any recommendations, feel free to reach out to me and say, hey, this is somebody I would love to be able to hear from. So let me know. All right, I guess
you need to auction that rig with the green lights, David.
Do what?
You need to auction that rig with the green lights.
It's actually part of the board. And what we did is we took there's trying to pull it up now. Push it inside. It's actually fiber optic cable drilled into a hole, and then we just, so I can actually change these colors as we go. So right now it's green. Put it into my beard there. But yeah, it'd be kind of hard to auction that one off, but maybe we could. I don't know. We'll do something for charity one of these days. I've got drill bits and everything else laying around here that we 3D print, so maybe we could do something like that. Great idea, John. Great idea. I'm pointing at the screen instead of you, like on my finger. All right, guys. Thanks everybody for watching. Please share, like, subscribe. Let everybody know about the Vidor Locksmith show. And we will continue to grow this. We will continue to bring you shows every Friday, as long as I don't have something else going on. But I mean, I'm not doing anything. So, all right, guys. With that, we are out.